Hello, everyone. I hope you've had your coffees and teas and you're feeling ready for today. So my name's Sam. I'm a UCL master's student, and I've also been working on the Pyramids of Life project. But more specifically, I've been working on kind of what the preferences are and the attitudes are of the younger generations, and looking at, for my dissertation, some behavioural experiments. So I'll get right away. So in terms of the overview, I'll just give a very brief overview of UK fish consumption more generally. And then I'll talk about how this relates to the higher education sector, kind of give an idea of our research rationale and the main aims, before kind of talking about some initial insights we've had from our student survey, and then talk about the behavioural intervention that I'm carrying out for my dissertation that will also later lead to a behavioural intervention as part of the Pyramids of Life project. So generally, UK fish consumption. So in terms of in the UK, most fish consumption has actually declined in the last several years. But where there is demand, it's concentrated amongst only 5 unsustainable fish species. So shifting kind of consumers' preferences away from these fish species towards a more diversified seafood diet can have environmental and health benefits to consumers, but also have sustainability benefits in terms of local fisheries. So this relates to the higher education sector, who can play a key role in highlighting sustainable principles and practices. And for this research project, we've looked at 3 universities, the University of East Anglia, University College London, and University of York, all of which have their own sustainability policies, with varying emphasis placed on fish consumption. But it's really important to kind of consider the younger generations as, it's a key research gap that's been suggested in the DEFRA evidence statement. So in terms of the research rationale, the main focus is to kind of understand what the preferences and attitudes of the younger generations are, and then use these insights to kind of create some novel nudges to change consumer behavior. So in terms of the study design, we started off with a pilot survey at UEA last year in the summer. And then after that survey, we had a follow-up focus group with people like the campus managers and chefs at the campus to kind of feed into the next survey we wanted to carry out across the 3 institutions, which we have done now. We've had over 1,000 participants as part of that survey. And now the next step is kind of designing these behavioural interventions for my dissertation at UCL, which we use as this kind of pilot study to then consider further steps with the Pyramids of Life at York and UEA. So in terms of the survey insights, one of the key things that we really wanted to see within the survey is what the differences it could be in terms of consumer preferences and what they're actually kind of doing. So one of the first questions we asked was about kind of, please, can you rank your favorite types of meat? And here we can see that chicken was kind of the favorite type of meat, predictably. Seafood was second, followed by beef. Sorry, this is the frequency. So this is how we asked them how often you consume these different types of meat, basically. And here we can see chicken is the most consumed, seafood is the second most consumed, and beef is the third most consumed. Then we also asked, what is your favorite type of meat, which is a different kind of question. And here we can see, of course, it's similar with chicken, seafood, and beef, but there is a difference in the relative percentages, which might suggest there's kind of a difference between the preferences of students and the reality of the meat that's kind of consumed. And then we kind of wanted to understand some better about what students, how they feel about fish more generally. So we provided a set of matrices with statements that were derived from the focus groups, but also from kind of literature. It might be hard to read some of these statements to the back, but in general, students tended to disagree that, students tended to disagree that, tended to agree that fish tastes good, and they said that kind of high prices stopped them from eating kind of the fish that they liked. And bones was also a significant factor to consider in terms of diversifying seafood consumption. And also, interestingly, students said that it made them feel kind of pleasant and satisfied after eating fish. So I guess it's that warm glow feeling that they got. And interestingly, social pressure wasn't actually that significant. So we thought actually students might be a bit worried about cooking fish around others or eating fish around others because of the smell, etc. But actually that wasn't too significant. And then we kind of wanted to know what the important characteristics were that would determine kind of whether they would choose a fish dish or not, or what was important to them when looking at seafood products. And some of the key things were to know they were derived from healthy stocks, to know that they were certified, to know that they were locally caught as well. But interestingly, social media wasn't actually that important. So a lot of the campus managers were focusing on kind of Instagrammable or snappable kind of meals, but actually in this research that we've done with the student survey, it suggests that it's not actually that important to students to have a dish that looks nice when you photograph it. And then we asked how they felt about the actual seafood that's offered on campus. And here we can see, you know, that students tended to either strongly disagree or not know whether there was various species offered on campus, whether it was locally caught, whether it was sustainable, or generally whether information was offered. So there's a clear mismatch between kind of the preferences and wants of students and the reality of seafood messaging on campus. And this was consistent across the 3 universities. And then we started to look at kind of, we wanted to gauge what students' knowledge may be around fish consumption more generally. So we asked these kind of test-based questions to see whether they got these questions right, and then asked them about how confident they feel that they got those questions right. And here we can see most students, we kind of asked the macro question, more based on kind of what are the 5 most consumed fish, but also a more micro one based on the sustainability policy at the universities. And most students tended to get the questions wrong. But even if they did get it right, they were fairly unconfident that they did get it right. So as well as this, we kind of leading on to from this, we asked them whether if a variety of fish species were offered on campus, would they be willing to try those species? And overwhelmingly, I mean, students said they would be willing to try these different fish species. And we also asked about the Good Fish Guide, and students tended to overwhelmingly not know what the Good Fish Guide was. And even, I haven't included the graph here, but even if they did know what it was, they didn't really use it in their decision making. And so all of these survey kind of insights were used to kind of consider a behavioral experiment. So we wanted to have a more evidence-based approach towards the behavioral experiment instead of kind of taking, just taking random concepts from behavioral economics and applying it. So in terms of the social sciences, my notes in the room, but a nudge is generally a change to the choice environment that kind of seeks to change behavior in a predictable way. But there's limited studies that have looked at this kind of intervention in terms of fish consumption. But of course, nudges are highly context dependent. So that's why we're taking this evidence-based approach. So for my dissertation, I'm seeking to carry out an information-based nudge on the UCL campus that's influenced by some of that research that I talked about in the student survey. And then the results from this will also help with a later behavioral experiment that will be carried out at York and UEA. And we're expecting to see kind of students shift towards a more diversified seafood diet after the behavioral nudge or during the behavioral nudge, and failing that, shift towards vegan or vegetarian food that would decrease the pressures on marine environments. So in terms of next steps, as I said, there's a further experiment conducted at York and UEA with follow-up focus groups from those with students, and a national seafood survey as well that we'll be talking about a bit more in the workshop later on. But yeah, I think that's everything. So thank you very much. And I do hope you come to the workshop later on. It'd be great to talk about the behavioral experiment there. So yeah.